Two positions that became vacant in the Constitutional Court earlier this year. The positions were left vacant by the retirement of Justices Sisi, Kampepe and Jafta. Interviews for the positions were first conducted in April but had to be redone in October after a court battle. Now many, including Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, are hoping Ramaphosa will move fast and appoint the replacements. Let's look at the implications of the vacant positions in the Apex Court. We speak now to Zikhona Ndlebe, who is the researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. Zikhona, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time this evening. You know, when you read different reports and you also speak to different sectors, it's no doubt that the delay in filling these vacancies is actually, having quite a significant impact on the court, especially when it comes to finalization of some judgments.
That's absolutely correct. So there are definitely adverse effects because of the president's failure to actually finalize the appointment of judges to the Constitutional Court. That means that there are currently acting judges at the Constitutional Court, which means that the permanent judges must provide guidance to the acting judges. So the quality of at the Constitutional Court has been affected by the vacancies. And again, we must think about the issue of security of tenure. If they're acting judges, that means that there is no security of tenure. We've had various allegations against the judiciary that have been made against judges. So if there is no security of tenure, then that means that there are chances that the allegations might hold weight, regardless of how much weight that those allegations will hold. But still, it's an issue that has to be resolved as soon as possible.
And reading what Advocate Pierre de Vos argues in an article that he wrote in the Daily Maverick, part of what he says that 2021 was arguably the most, difficult time for the courts. He says that it was the most turbulent year with a marked increase in populist attacks on the court, which makes the inexplicable failure to appoint a new Chief Justice as well as to fill 4 vacancies on the court inexcusable and irresponsible. Now, what would you, in your view, attribute these delays to? Is it because the president is still consulting, or is it because some are saying that it's just indecision?
As we heard when the acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was releasing the annual judiciary report, he said that the president is still consulting. And in terms of the Constitution, the president is entitled to consult leaders of political parties that are represented in the National Assembly, especially when it comes to Constitutional Court vacancies. So it is the consultation process that is holding up the president. However, the president still needs to make a decision as to whether he is going to make the final appointments to the Constitutional Court from the list of names that has been provided by the JSC. And he has the discretion not to make the final appointment in terms of Section 174, subsection 4 of the Constitution. Maybe that is another reason that is holding up the president. But at the end of the day, there are adverse effects for not filling the vacancies, and the vacancies has to be filled in regardless of what the decision the president does make at the end of the day.
And talking about the consultation process, when you read the statement that was released by Freedom Under Law, they don't mince their words when it comes to the JSC and the crisis that they say is now at hand for the country. And they also even talk about how the JSC itself has, conceded in the courts when it comes to, some of the issues with this particular process. How much of an impact is that going to have in the process then going forward? Could we find ourselves back to where we were in April?
We are hoping that that's not going to happen. We won't find ourselves back to where we were in April. But obviously, the way that the JSC has conducted the interviews back in April has also contributed to where we are now, because obviously, when the president is consulting with members of political parties, perhaps there will be members that are going to raise the issues that the JSC, the way that the JSC conducted the interviews in April, and the fact that the recommended candidates are the same candidates that were recommended in April. So that's going to be an issue as well. But to prevent the same issue coming up in the future, the JSC needs to have a set criteria, which is what we have been saying. And the JSC currently does not have a set criteria. It only considers Section 174 of the Constitution, and that is it as far as we are aware. And we will continue to advocate for the JSC to have a set criteria to ensure that the same thing that happened in April does not happen again in the future.
Now, Zikhona, others have been arguing that the apex court must be exemplary because it is the highest court in the land. And, now when it found itself in a position where, its acting leader was seized with the work of the State Capture Commission, others were saying that it is pretty much leaderless, especially when the former Chief Justice left, and now they say that the focus should not only be on just the filling of these two posts left by the two justices, but also the appointment of the head of that particular court. And others are even going as far as saying that the president was negligent to not even appoint someone ahead of the retirement of Mogoeng.
Well, the fact is that we all knew that the former Chief Justice Mogoeng was going to retire in October, including Justices Kampepe and Justices Jafta. We all knew that. And the president should have undertaken the process at an earlier stage, the appointment of the Chief Justice process at an earlier stage. And the president did not do that without any valid reasons. And it is quite unfortunate that the interviews of the Chief Justice will only take place in February next year. We were hoping that at least the interviews will take place in December, so that when we get to 2022, we already have a leader of the apex court.
Now, Zikhona, very briefly, in just 30 seconds, we've run out of time. Let's talk about how you really envision this going forward, because when we listen to the acting Chief Justice, he says that the processes in the past have been known to take slightly longer. I mean, a delay here is also a delay for some of those who are waiting for judgments to be finalized.
That is absolutely correct. I don't think we can excuse the president's delay by saying that there've been longer delays in the past. That is absolutely unacceptable. And those delays, the acting Chief Justice did not state which years or when those delays had been in the past. So basically, that's not acceptable. The president needs to make the appointments as soon as possible and hopefully before the end of this year.
Zikhona, thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Zikhona Ndlebe, who is the researcher and advocacy officer at